Thank you all for participating in this extended professional learning opportunity, which we call EPLO. Now, for some of you, you might have seen emails come out and you were like, well, how come I can't join that? Well, now is your opportunity to become a part of the extended learning professional opportunities that the district is providing. One second, I'm trying to make this a full screen, but it's not working right. So welcome to EPLO, everybody, Extended Professional Learning Opportunities. You will see emails coming from me providing you with an opportunity bi-weekly to learn about a new concept within our workspace. When you are joining the bi-weekly sessions, you'll have an opportunity to learn about something that is near and dear to you, or maybe just a concept that you need to be refreshed on, or just providing you with additional information that supports your office area. You'll also have an opportunity to do that uninterrupted, as it is from 4:30 to 5:30. And you will receive payment for participating in this particular extended professional learning opportunity. So the expectations for this work will that no one will be admitted after 4:45. So if you are still at work and you want to log in, make sure you do it before 4:45, okay? You must remain on the session the entire time and create the evaluation provided at the end in order to be paid for your time on the call. We will not send the evaluation link to you outside of our session, unless in our session you're unable to try through every method, putting it in your URL bar or clicking on it and it not popping up, then I can send it to you while we're in this session. But if you have issues after the fact, the actual evaluation closes at the end of business today, and there is no additional opportunity for you to do that later. So what that means is that if there's no evaluation, there's no pay that you can receive for this. So please be mindful to do the evaluation once we have completed our session. And there will be a few times that I drop it in the chat. So if you don't see it, I'll just continue to drop it in so that everybody is able to get what they need. You must be clocked out of Chronos to get paid for EPLO. The purpose for that is because we're utilizing a different funding source. And so you'll need to clock out in order to be paid. And we take the chat, the evaluation, we merge those two things together to identify the participants who get paid for this time. Are there any questions about anything that you've heard thus far? All right. So for those of you who are just now logging in, please make sure that you are clocked out of Chronos and that you enter your name, your ID, location, and your title in the chat. Without further ado, let's talk about CCSDAS legislation. How many of you are familiar with the DAS legislation? Show of hands. Yeah, familiar? Thumbs up, okay. All right. Perfect. How many of you remember doing CCSDAS legislation on a typewriter? Actually formatting the page yourself, making sure that you had justifications and bolded and all of those things. Well, CCSDAS has now created a process that is a little bit more streamlined and allows you to actually do things a little bit more quickly. And so what we'll talk about are the learning outcomes today. So what is legislation? You'll understand why it's needed and who can be boarded. You'll understand the different types of legislation that are out there. And then what happens after you push the submit button. Are we all in agreement that those are things we can learn today and be okay with learning about? All right, perfect. So what is board legislation? Board legislation is what governs our district. We have a group of 7 individuals who are responsible for assisting us with making decisions for the district. They are the board members. So I'm sure that you see every Tuesday there is a board meeting that occurs, and those individuals are making decisions on behalf of us, whether that be for discharging certain matters, functions, or representation or fiduciary responsibilities throughout the district. The board governs us. Why is legislation important to our district? Because there is no business that can be conducted in our district without board approval. How many of you knew that? There was nothing that can be done in our district unless it's boarded. Nothing at all. People can't be fired, people can't be hired, we can't add additional monies to things. Everything has to be boarded at some rate in our district. As I mentioned, we are governed by those 7 individuals, but some things to keep in mind when you're doing your legislation is to plan ahead. You have to plan ahead when you're doing legislation because it comes around every 2 weeks. At the end of this session, you'll be getting some resources from me that include a board legislation timeline that give you the dates for when you actually have to have things into CCSDAS in order for them to show up on the appropriate legislation date. The originator of the legislation is responsible for ensuring that every step of legislation happens before it gets to the board meeting. So you'll be responsible for entering it. You'll be responsible for putting all the details in there and making sure the funding codes are correct. If there are things that require Diane Bowman's approval, meaning like there's a donation of flutes or a donation of cash or things like that, you'll need to get those squared away with Diane Bowman first. New hires shall not start doing any work prior to the district's starting date for them when they are boarded. Know that there are some exceptions to the rules. There are teachers out there who can start before because they go through a new teacher's orientation. There are some administrators that are boarded before because they go through an orientation prior to their start dates, but there is no work that can happen in the district prior to it being boarded. Does anybody know what we call that? If someone is working prior to the board date or doing a service prior to being boarded, what do we call that? Anybody? It is called a then and now, meaning that they've done something then and we're trying to pay for it now. So then and nows are dangerous. We don't want any then and nows, okay? If you ever heard somebody talking about a then and now is really the essence of us either having a conversation with a vendor or starting a project or a program within our building, but not having a purchase order to cover it or not having a legislation to cover it. Okay. So there are 2 types of board legislation. I want you all to be very familiar when you hear people say, oh, well, let's do board legislation. There is a board legislation in CCSDAS, which is for people. So those extended time, supplemental services, stipends, those are people funded. When we're talking about a teacher is working above and beyond their workday, that's what we mean when we're saying put them in the CCSDAS system under legislation. But then there's also board docs, which is for goods or services that are greater than $25,000 or more. So anything that is $24,999 is not boarded. Anything over $24,999 is boarded. Okay. Are there any questions so far about anything you've heard? Feel free to raise your hand. Talk to me, ladies. We here. We got till 5:30. All righty. So moving along, there are 3 different types of legislation. There's supplemental, there's extended time, and there's in-service. So if you've ever heard somebody say, oh, well, let's give them a stipend. A stipend is supplemental services. It is usually at the rate of $135 an hour. And it's usually done because we can't afford to pay that person their actual hourly rate to do a good or a service above and beyond their work day. So they'll get a stipend for doing this. There's extended time, which is for certificated staff only. What I mean by certificated staff are people who are instructing children, people who have a teaching license. Those are considered certificated employees. And they are able to get extended time for work that is done above and beyond their workday. So it cannot fall between 7:30 and 2:45. It has to be 5:30 a.m. to 7, or 3 o'clock to 5:15, or however late they want to work. But it cannot be within the confines of their workday. It has to be above and beyond their workday. It is contractual. There's also an in-service. Now, in-services come at the rate of employees being able to receive a stipend for participating in a session, meaning there's nothing that they're being required to do. It's almost informational in nature. And so they're being paid a rate of $8.10 an hour for classified, or $10 for certificated. That rate of pay has not changed since I've been here 11 years. That has always been the same number in regards to the in-service types of training. And in-services happens for like latchkey assistants. They always have a beginning of the year meeting. They receive an in-service stipend for that. And if I can pause for just one moment, if you are new and logging in, please make sure that you are clocked out of Chronos. Enter your name, your ID, your location, and your title into the chat. Are there any questions before we move on about supplemental, extended, or in-services? So let me poll you all really quickly in the chat. If you believe we can just move on with this content, put a 3 in the chat. If you feel like I understand it, but I'd like to learn a little bit more later, but we can still move on, put a 2 in the chat. And if you are a 1, that means, oh my God, Lydia, slow down. We need to stop talking. I need to concentrate just a little bit. Okay, perfect. I'm seeing all 3s and a couple of 2s. All right. Great, so we'll keep on going. So what you'll see here is just the beginning web page for CCSDAS, and I'm going to stop sharing this presentation for just a second to actually get on the CCSDAS site so you all can see exactly how to maneuver that. Anybody familiar with how to get to CCSDAS? Feel free to come off mute and talk me through it.
Hi, Lydia. This is Carrie Ayers.
Hey, Carrie.
Hey, I get to it just from the CCS staff webpage. So yeah, you can click on it. There's a link like where Chronos and Red Rover and all those links are.
Yes,
and you
ma'am.
you can click on it right there and sign in.
So I'm assuming you're talking about this page.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
All right. And so right down here in the bottom, ladies, there's a thing that says CCSDAS. I'm hovering over it right now. So what I did was just typed in ccsoh.us, or you can click on the little home that is right next to your URL bar. That'll take you to the intranet. And then there's a link for ccsoh.us on there. But if you want, thank you, Carrie, for that. If you want to click on CCSDAS, you're able to do that. Now, please remember CCSDAS is Active Directory, meaning that what you use to log in typically is what you're going to use to log into this system. So if you have functionality to do both things, feel free to go along with me in regards to opening up the legislation. So we'll get to the CCSDAS page, and I'm going to click up. I changed my password. Hang on, ladies.
Lydia, I have a question. Is it also available through Infinite Campus?
It is. I believe there's a space on the dashboard. And Cheryl, thank you for saying that. Let's check and see.
I don't personally use it, but I thought I've seen Rhonda Claiborne get it from there.
You might have, because you know Rhonda Claiborne is amazing. So you definitely might have seen that happen.
Who put that in there?
Dashboard, here it is. Let's see. They might have a link in there.
I think you just went past it. It was on.
I say you just passed it, yeah.
Uh-oh.
It's under
So,
business.
Here we go, right here. Business Solutions. Thank you. That's a new place I've never seen before. So you can also get it from there. Perfect. Let me close down some of my things here. So As you're looking at the DAS board, you'll see things over to the left. You see CCSDAS here, you see the home, you see a thing, general request. Now under general request, you can do a lot of things. You can do an allocations request. You can do a data request in the district. You can also do a request to attend a conference. If you go to payroll, this gives you a severance calculator. It's a little new feature they've added there. There's a distribution center. So for records retention, if you need to send records to the warehouse, this is a place to go. There's also student information that provides you detailed information about seats in special ed classrooms, course requirements, and course requests. We have fee waivers down here. So if you are a person who is able to take up an administrative coursework, you're able to do a fee waiver request here. But the one we want is legislation. So we will go to legislation request and click on that. Now, again, if you were that person who had done legislation years ago, this is going to blow your mind, hopefully, and you'll be able to capture some information that you might have never been able to really put together quickly, but this does it for you extremely fast. So we'll start brand new. We'll click on new. And so please note that once you click on new, you will see dates at the top. So the next board date is December 20th, but I have to have this into CCSDAS by December 5th in order for it to show up on that board date. So today is November 15th, plenty of time, but make sure that you are honoring those dates, because if you don't get it in by those dates, they won't process your legislation. So after we've looked at the dates, we're now looking at the different types of legislation. And again, there's extended time, there's in-services, there's supplemental service. And so let's just pick on an extended time. And so what you'll have to do inside of here is identify a purpose for why you need the money, because secretaries are amazing. You'll need to also identify a date. Please know that CCSDAS does not allow you to go backward in date. Actually, they've made modification. It allows you to go backward in date. And so you're able to backdate things inside of the system. So let's say if you needed to do a legislation that was supposed to have shown up back in October, you can do that. But again, we talked about it being a then and now. Those are emergent needs. Please make sure that you are sticking to the present day. So let's say our legislation needs to start today. And when should the end date be? Let's say the end of the school year. And we'll make that May 31st. So we've got a time frame in which we need to do something. But if you scroll down to the bottom a little bit, you'll notice that there is something that's forming on your behalf, and that is starting to look like your legislation. If you also notice in that sentence, because does not need to be capitalized because there's a word for already there. We will talk about the funding source. So there are multiple types of funding within the CCSDAS profile. They go all the way from the Treasury Fund. They deal with the McKinney-Vento. They deal with ESSER funds. They deal with Title I funds. We've got every type of funding source you can imagine listed inside of CCSDAS. Please know, though, that if you are selecting a funding source, that you must have correct coding. And correct coding is that long string of things like 001, 0100, 052213, 410, that whole line of numbers, that's your string of coding. CCSDAS only requires the first two set of numbers. So 001, and then the SCC code, which will then populate itself if you are associated with a particular funding source, and mine is 001-934. So it put the funding source and my OPU together. So then we have the departments or the school. So we're able to pick between the two. If you select the school, it will give you a drop down of every school alphabetically. I believe this even has world languages included at this point, yes. And so every school is included inside of there. If you do departments will provide you with a list of some of the chief's areas that will be doing legislation. And so there's academic services, there's engagement, state and federal funds, business and operations. So let's just say for the sake of this, we're going to select just this department just for giggles really quickly, and we'll do academic achievement. So within academic achievement, these are the offices that are found under there. And so there's Office of Transformation Leadership, Innovation and Improvement, Teaching and Learning, and we'll stick with Teaching and Learning just to keep it consistent all the way across. And then if there is a division, meaning that there is a particular department or a grouping of individuals that this will fall under, you can select it from here. If you don't happen to see yours, you just want to do academic services all the way across if that belongs to you. And so we'll do that for the sake of this. Any questions so far? If we are at a 3, meaning we can keep going. If we're at a 2, meaning I understand it, but I'll come back to that later. Or a 1, we need more assistance. Put that in the chat for me, 3, 2, 1. Thank you, thank you. You guys are giving me permission to move on. So now there's types of hours. So we can do hours per person or hours for the project. And so if we do hours per person, we can say that each person will get 250 hours per person. Or if we do it for the project, we can say there's 250 hours in the total project, and it will calculate that information for us specifically. So let's go back to just the hours per person. So each secretary will get 250 hours per person. The tricky part is when you're trying to identify people. Know that extended time deals with certificated staff only. So if you are working and trying to do legislation for classified employees, it will be declined and rejected. You are not able to do legislation for classified staff, only certificated individuals. So currently I have a not in list, meaning that there's nobody that's assigned to me. So some of you probably already have people that are assigned to you, and you can just click on those people. So we'll begin to look up names. So I can type in my name. I can type in, let's see. Let's see if Dr. Dixon shows up. Dr. Talisa Dixon, she and I can be working on a project together. And after I've selected all the people, I can add all to list. And so what it will do is it will drop individuals into my legislation. So as we're looking down, I was showing you that there is legislation that's being formed on your behalf at the bottom of what you've typed in. So Academic Support Services, the Office of Teaching and Learning and Academic Support Services, because secretaries are amazing, from November 15th through May 31st, not to exceed 250 hours per person, for a total of 500 hours per person for the project. Payment is to be made from the general fund in the amount of $19,510, showing the 2 individuals. And so what you learn from this legislation is that each person gets 250 hours, is why the total is not to exceed 500. Munis is what actually gives the system this number, because it tells us what each person's per hour value is based off of the pay rate that Munis has assigned to them. And it's how they come up with this number. So after we've got our legislation all together, we can click submit for approval. And right below, my screen is being covered up by some stuff, but right below there should be another submit button. And so once you have 2 reds, that means you're able to submit something for approval. If you have a gray and a red, that means you are drafting something. So this has to say no, and the other button below is a red, and it's just saying you're in draft mode again. So let's look at this from the perspective of a supplemental services, meaning that we're giving a stipend for the amount of money. And so you'll notice a few variations in what it looks like. So again, we're still dealing with that same purpose because we're just amazing individuals. But there's dates that are listed. There's also the funding source, as I mentioned before. There's a department or a school. So we can pick a school. Let's pick a good one. Let's go to CAUSE. And so CAUSE has a simple purpose. And that simple purpose could look like something that's already here, already explained. So there might be a BLT or TBT. There might be an OIP facilitation. And some of these words are obsolete, but they have not been taken out because they were initially some form of professional learning opportunities for people. And so we'll stick with curriculum writing, which it automatically defaults to, but we'll say each person gets $135. And we can do that per day, or we can do that per person. So Dr. Dixon and I also get down here. And so what this has done is it's taken the dates and it's given us that amount of money over the course of those dates. So now it's not 19,000 anymore, it's 53,000 over the course of that amount of time. And if we change this to a per person, it shows that each person would get $270 per day. And I don't believe this is actually picking up Dr. Dixon, is why that's doing that way. Yeah, I'm not certain as to why that's not picking that up when we do a per person. And it might be because her name doesn't show on this list. It's just showing down here. So after you've clicked submit, what happens? Anybody know what happens after you click submit?
If it's gray, it would go into a draft, and if it's on red, it would be submitted to be approved through whoever your approvers are.
Correct, whoever your approvers are, that's the workflow that you live in. And so if you click the draft, it will say something like this. Can you, Ms. Teresa, can you see where it says you're about to save this request as a draft?
It would not be, yes,
Okay.
I can see it.
And perfect. So if you have a gray and a red, this is what you'll see when you're clicking the submit button. And so what this particular view is that you see now are all the legislations that are submitted. Regina DeLoach is your actual contact for board legislation. She is the one who processes legislation and takes it from the form that you've entered into creating a process for board legislation days. So you wait for your approver to your supervisor to approve the request. And then maybe in about 2 weeks or so, a week to 2 weeks, you should receive a project summary. Now, for some of you, a project summary looks a little bit like this particular document on your left. And you get those project summaries from Alana Dressman. I want to kind of really call your attention to what a project summary does. So a project summary, sorry, I moved screens too soon. So a project summary brings you to information. So the control number is for the treasurer's office. That is how they identify where they're pulling the money from. It has a location, a supervisor, the actual board date, and the page number that you can find it in the board minutes. It also provides you with the details of why this legislation happened. So this particular group of people, they were reviewing professional development modules beyond the workday. So February 3rd through the 24th, people were able to turn in timesheets that supported this legislation. And they only got a max of 4 hours for their time of doing that. And it came from the Improving Teacher Quality Fund. And so you see their funding source right here. How many of you have ever received a project summary from Alana Dressman? Go ahead and give me a thumbs up, or use your reaction button and give me a thumbs up. Perfect. Perfection. And so what you now see down here are individuals who were a part of that legislation. And so you have Mark Antolini, Lori Collins, and Richard McClure. All of those people will be getting paid either 1 to 4 hours of service for completing the project. And it's 1 to 4 hours because remember, the maximum amount allowable is 4 hours for the project. And so you would just write in on the hours worked, how many hours a person has supported the work. Leslie, do you have a question? Okay. And so let me go back a page or two. And so this is the stipend timesheet. As I mentioned before, Alana Dressman sends out the project summary for extended time, but this stipend timesheet, you actually have to find on employee self-service. Ms. Betty Erie has provided an explanation of what's needed in order to support submitting the stipend timesheet. And so the stipend timesheet is completed with all the following information below. So again, it goes back to that board date, enter the description. You have to have full coding, and then each employee's ID number and their name and the amount of money that they're to get for their service. Please know that a supervisor's signature is required. You have to have a supervisory signature along with the date. And this particular form is blue ink and original signatures only. There are supporting documents that also go along with doing a stipend timesheet, and that could be those sign-in sheets, a meeting schedule, a copy of any published products like an agenda or the presentation, and then other evidence that the duty was completed. So with stipend timesheets, you have to prove something was done. With extended time and in-service, timesheets are required. Ms. Carey, I saw that you put something in the chat. You're not sure as you're new. What would you like to expound on that? I'm not certain of what you were asking about. Okay. We'll move on and come back.
That's right. Sorry about that.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm working on my laptop and a chair in my house, so I apologize.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah, I'm not even technically a secretary, but I'm looking forward to maybe getting to that point. So I'm just trying to learn things.
Okay.
So that if I decide to apply for that position right now,
Mhm.
I'm a school program specialist dealing
Okay.
with truancy.
Got it.
So this isn't exactly my wheelhouse, but I'd like to get more information. So if it sounds like I don't know what you're talking about, I probably don't, but the more I learn, then, then I can move up the ranks, hopefully, because I'll
Yeah.
have the knowledge.
Got it. And feel free to reach out to me. I am a resource for you that can support you with learning about what it is that you'd like to know to make the move to secretarial world. And secretaries, aren't we glad to hear somebody wants to be a secretary? Yay!
Yay. I love what I do right now.
Mhm.
Don't get me wrong. These kids are awesome, but if I could pull myself up just a little bit, but again, I'm new. I just
Absolutely.
started this year, so.
Absolutely. So glad
Thank
that
you.
you even have a willingness to do that. So thank you so
Of-
much for saying it.
Of course, thank you.
You're welcome.
Lydia, I have a question. So
Yes.
when you're doing the board legislation, it
Mhm.
calculates the total that they will be paid. Is there a way that it can be added that it could also show their fringe?
So fringe is not a part of the extended time,
Okay.
as far as I
That's something
understand.
that principals always, they have to calculate that as well. So they'll
Got
give
it.
me that number, but they, then we always have to do the fringe calculation on our
Mhm.
own, which is not hard, but it would be nice
Yeah.
if they could see it.
Yeah, and it's not calculated because Munis doesn't pull fringe when they're doing this particular number, and fringe benefits for people on the line. Fringe is the benefits that you would get for working the extra time, but Munis doesn't pull that number. It only pulls the total dollar amount for the hours, not the fringe. That is something that I believe Ms. Deloach and the team have been trying to work through to get that added, because it is just another functionality of making more addition with those numbers. So hopefully it works out for the area treasurers, Cheryl, so you don't have to do so much of that on the back end.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Please know that classified people get love too, though. I know you've heard me say you can't be boarded, but you can work. You just can't be boarded. They don't board you. And so there is a timesheet out there for classified employees specifically that deals with regular hours, extra service, comp time, and overtime. Do not, and I repeat, do not just begin filling out an extra service timesheet on your own. It must be approved by your supervisor. You have to have appropriate coding and you need to go through the proper channels, but you can receive extra service for doing things that are above and beyond your workday with permission. Some of you might have worked on some summer learning experiences. Some of you might be asked to do something after work or help out and pitch in with a different department. And so this is the timesheet that you would use to do that work for classified employees. So on here, it looks just a little bit different than the certificated timesheets because it is, and it's just providing you with information about your name and your location, your phone number. And if you're filling these out in the summertime or any other time, include your personal phone number in the event they need to call you to get something changed or modified. Ms. Carey, I see your hand. You have a question?
I do.
Yes, ma'am.
So I guess my question would be for instances like that, it wouldn't be you stay clocked in or you get clocked in and out situation, you would use this timesheet?
So when you're doing extra service, you still need to be on the clock. The EPLO program is
that's in addition to.
correct.
Oh, okay. I think I've been cheating myself. Thank you for that clarification, ma'am.
Yes. And I will actually be linking these forms and documents in an email that goes out to you, but you can also find this particular timesheet on the Employee Self-Services website. It's under the resources area.
Copy that. Thank you.
Yes,
Just
ma'am.
to,
Lydia,
just
I
to be
think,
clear, you saying you have to clock in and out and fill out a time sheet?
If you're doing extra service. Cheryl, what were you going to say?
I was just gonna ask for some clarification on that as well. I
Yep.
think Carrie might have misunderstood that it's additional. Even though you're still on the clock, when payroll receives this timesheet, they would pay that time that you were on the clock from this fund. You're not getting your clock time and then getting this on top of it.
Oh, correct. Yes, I misunderstood you. I apologize. So let me just really clarify that really quickly. So a person is working their regular 8-hour shift, right? You've clocked out at the end of your time, you clock back in citing you're doing extra service. You also need to fill out this timesheet in addition to that and also clock out at the end of the day for that. Perfect. All right. Again, this particular form is found on the Employee Self-Services webpage under resources.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
If you're doing it in the summer, you just fill out the extended timesheet, right?
So there's a difference between extended time and extra service. Extended time is for certificated staff.
I'm sorry, for extra service. You would just fill this out because it's like maybe you're working from home helping out with a project that the certificated staff is doing.
That is all contingent on what your administrator asks of you. So last year when we were doing work with COVID, they had, some people did a Google Doc, which was their kind of like their Kronos machine. They just completed the Google Doc and submitted that along with this timesheet you're looking at. Other people did work inside of the building, so they were using the Kronos machine, clocking in and out. So it's all contingent on how your supervisor has set up your means of accounting for what you're doing. I hope that was helpful, Ms. Velma.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, give me a 3, 2, or a 1. Are we okay with this? 3, 2 meaning you understand it, but we can talk about it later, or a 1, you want to talk about it some more. 3 2s or 1s, where are we at? Ms. Velma, we'll reconnect after this, okay? Ms. Prince, you will connect with me too. We'll make sure we get this together. Okay, perfect. So before we end our session, I want to make sure that everyone is aware of the rules of EPLO, just to provide you with some context about what is happening during this 4:30 to 5:30 slot. No one will be admitted after 4:45 p.m. Can I get a thumbs up if you are in agreement, or a yes in the chat? If you show up after 4:45, you will not be admitted. All right. You must remain on the session the entire time and receive the evaluation link that will be in the chat at the end of the session. We okay with that too? Perfect. Thumbs up and yeses. We will not be sending the evaluation to you after the session is over, unless you've stated on the call that you're having technical issues and you're not able to open up the link. We good with that one? Miss Teresa, you raised your hand. Yes, ma'am. I see you, see you, see you. Perfect. Remember, if you do not complete the evaluation, you receive no pay for this particular session. Are we in agreement that we will complete the evaluation? Yes? All right. Wait, who gave me a thumbs down? That's all right, Miss Brenda.
That was a
And you-
mistake. I'm sorry. I was trying
Oh,
to
okay.
say thumbs up.
That was funny. You added some flavor to the chat. That's all right. And then the final thing is you must be clocked out of Chronos to get paid for these hours. So as you were logging on, I was making you aware that if you were still clocked in, you needed to be clocked out. You have to be clocked out of Chronos in order to be paid. Our funds come from the ESSER dollars. And so the way that you're paid is just a little bit different. And so what we do is we take the evaluation that you're completing along with the information you've added to the chat, which was your name, your location, your employee ID number, and your title. We match those up and you get paid for participating in this extended professional learning opportunity. Are there any question about any of these 5 things that you all agreed that you would do or agreed to? I'm posting the evaluation in just 1 second.